The power went out at 2 in the morning during the worst ice storm Tennessee had seen in 30 years. And I knew immediately that my $100,000 freezer full of restaurant inventory was about to become the most expensive pile of rotting meat in Nashville. I jerked awake to the sound of silence, not peaceful silence, but the kind that screams something is wrong. My industrial freezer in the garage had a low hum that I had gotten so used to over the past 5 years that I only noticed it when it stopped. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 2:17 in the morning. Outside my window, the streetlights were dark, and ice coated everything like the world had been dipped in glass. My name is Vincent Dalton, and I own a catering business that operates out of my home in the Willowbrook Estates subdivision, just outside Nashville proper. I had permits, licenses, everything legal and above board. The house had been specifically chosen because the garage had been converted into a commercial-grade kitchen by the previous owner, and the zoning allowed for home-based food businesses. I had contracts with 3 major corporate clients and 2 wedding venues. That freezer held about $80,000 worth of prime cuts, seafood, and specialty items for events scheduled over the next 2 weeks. I threw on clothes and ran to the garage. My breath fogged in the air. The temperature was already rising inside the freezer. I had maybe 4 hours before things started to go bad, less for the seafood. I did the only logical thing. I called my electrician. "Vincent, it is 2 in the morning," Mike answered, his voice thick with sleep. "Mike, I need you to install my backup generator. Now, tonight I will pay you triple." There was a pause. "The whole neighborhood is out, everything. Ice storm took down the lines. I can be there in 40 minutes. "But Vincent, did not you tell me your HOA was giving you grief about that generator?" "I do not care what they say. I am about to lose everything if we do not get power back." Mike arrived 37 minutes later in his truck, and we worked in the freezing darkness with headlamps and numb fingers. The generator was a good one, a Generac Guardian series that I had purchased 6 months earlier for exactly this kind of emergency. It was rated for whole house backup and ran on natural gas from the main line, so I would not have to worry about refueling. The HOA had sent me a nastogram about it 3 months ago when I had the pad poured, claiming generators were not permitted per the covenants. I had written back citing Tennessee state law that specifically protected the right to install backup generators, but they had not responded. By 4:30 in the morning, the generator kicked on with a beautiful roar that settled into a steady hum. Lights blazed in my house. The freezer hummed back to life. I could have cried with relief. "You are good to go," Mike said, packing up his tools. "This thing will run as long as you need it. The natural gas line will not freeze." I paid him in cash, adding an extra $500 as a thank you. He drove off into the dark, icy morning, and I went inside to make coffee and wait for dawn. The sun came up gray and cold. Ice covered everything. Trees sagged under the weight. Power lines lay across roads like dead snakes. I checked the news. The power company was saying it could be 3 to 5 days before electricity was restored to all areas. Some neighborhoods might be out for a week. My generator hummed steadily. My house was warm. My business was safe. At 9 in the morning, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Brenda Patterson standing on my porch, wrapped in a puffy coat, her breath steaming. Brenda was the HOA president, a woman in her early 50s with the kind of haircut that demanded to speak to managers. She had moved into the neighborhood 2 years ago and immediately inserted herself into every possible position of authority. "Mr. Dalton," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut the ice around us, "that generator is in violation of our covenants." "Good morning to you too, Brenda." "The generator is legal under Tennessee state law. Our covenants supersede state law when it comes to aesthetics and neighborhood standards. That is not how law works, I said. State law explicitly protects homeowners' rights to install backup generators. I have everything permitted through the county. You are disrupting the peaceful enjoyment of the neighborhood with that noise. I looked past her. 2 houses down, I could see my neighbor Frank trying to chip ice off his car. Across the street, the Morrison family was loading into their SUV, probably heading to a hotel. Everyone was dealing with the power outage except me. Brenda, everyone is without power. I have a business to protect. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to operate a business in a residential neighborhood. I have all the proper permits and licenses. This house was zoned for this before I bought it. The HOA board will be issuing you a fine. $500 per day until that generator is removed or shut down. She handed me an envelope. This is your official notice. I took the envelope. You cannot be serious. Completely serious. The covenants are clear. No generators without prior written approval from the board. I applied for approval 3 months ago and never received a response. Your application was denied. I never received a denial letter. That is not my problem. Shut down the generator or face daily fines. She turned and picked her way carefully down my icy driveway to her car, which was running. She had clearly been staying somewhere with power. I closed the door and opened the envelope. Sure enough, there was an official-looking letter on HOA letterhead, dated that morning, informing me of the $500 per day fine for operating an unapproved generator. There was also a copy of my application from 3 months ago with a red denied stamp across it. But the date on the stamp was from yesterday. She had backdated the denial. I called my lawyer, David Chen, who specialized in HOA disputes. Vincent, do not shut down the generator, he said immediately. Tennessee Code 43-1 through 39 specifically protects your right to operate backup generators. HOAs cannot prohibit them. They can regulate placement and noise levels within reason, but they cannot ban them or require advance approval. So the fines are not enforceable, completely unenforceable. In fact, if she keeps pushing this, you could probably sue the HOA for harassment. But first, let me send her a cease and desist letter. That usually scares them off. Do it. And David, she backdated a denial letter. Is that fraud? It is definitely not legal. Keep all the documentation. If this goes to court, that will look very bad for her. I spent the rest of the day monitoring my systems and checking in with clients. The generator performed perfectly. My house stayed warm and lit, while the rest of the neighborhood stayed dark and cold. That evening, I decided to walk around the subdivision to check on neighbors. The ice was still thick, but the main roads had been salted. I knocked on Frank's door 2 houses down. Frank answered wearing 3 layers and a blanket. Vincent, hey, come in quick, trying to keep the heat in. How are you holding up? It is freezing. We are all sleeping in the living room with the gas fireplace going. Power company says maybe 3 more days. You want to come use my shower? Get some hot water. Frank's face lit up. Seriously, that would be amazing. Let me tell Sarah. Over the next few hours, I had half the street rotating through my house. People came to charge their phones, take hot showers, warm up, make coffee. I did not mind. The generator was handling it fine, and these were good people. Around 8 that evening, as the Hendersons were leaving with their phones charged and spirits lifted, my doorbell rang again. Brenda stood there with a man I did not recognize. He was wearing a security uniform. Mr. Dalton, you are running a commercial operation without proper permits. What are you talking about? Multiple people have been seen entering and leaving your property. You are clearly operating some kind of business. I am letting my neighbors warm up and charge their phones during an ice storm because I am not a terrible person. The covenants prohibit commercial activity. Good thing this is not commercial activity then. No money is changing hands. I am being neighborly. The security guard shifted uncomfortably. He clearly did not want to be there. This is your second violation, Brenda said. I am adding another $500 per day fine for unauthorized commercial activity. Get off my property. Excuse me. You heard me. Get off my property. Right now. You are harassing me and my lawyer will be hearing about this. Brenda's face went red. You cannot speak to me that way. I am the HOA president. I do not care if you are the Queen of England. You are trespassing. Leave. The security guard put his hand on Brenda's elbow. Madam, we should go. They left and I immediately called David. She is escalating, he said after I explained. I will have that cease and desist sent first thing tomorrow morning. But Vincent, be prepared. She sounds like the type who will push this as far as she can. The next morning, the power was still out across the neighborhood. My generator continued running smoothly. I woke to find another envelope taped to my door. Another $500 fine, this time for excessive noise pollution. I was up to $1,500 in daily fines according to Brenda's math. David's cease and desist letter arrived via courier at noon. I know because Brenda showed up at my door at 12:15, waving the letter. You are threatening legal action against the HOA. Your fines are illegal, Brenda. Tennessee state law is clear. We will see what a judge says about that. Yes, we will. I look forward to it. She stormed off and I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. That afternoon, I got a call from the county inspector's office. Someone had filed a complaint about my commercial kitchen, claiming I was operating without proper permits and creating health hazards. The inspector arrived 2 hours later. His name was Robert, and he looked exhausted. Mr. Dalton, I have to inspect your commercial kitchen operation. We received a complaint. I have all my permits and licenses. Everything is up to date. I showed him into the garage and produced my documentation. Robert went through everything methodically. He checked temperatures, inspected equipment, reviewed my permits and health department certifications, looked at my food storage and preparation areas. Everything is perfect, he said finally. I wish every operation I inspected was this clean and well documented. Whoever filed this complaint was wasting everyone's time. It was the HOA president. She is harassing me about my generator. Robert shook his head. I heard your generator when I pulled up. It is well within noise ordinances. Honestly, half the houses in this county have generators running right now. It is an ice storm. Try telling her that. Listen off the record, document everything. Every interaction, every fine notice, every complaint. If she is harassing you, you will want that paper trail. After Robert left, I started a detailed log. Dates, times, conversations, copies of every letter and notice. I had a feeling I would need it. Day 3 of the power outage arrived. My generator continued running. The rest of the neighborhood was getting desperate. The cold was brutal. People were running out of food. The roads were still too icy for safe travel. I opened my house up as a warming center. People could come in shifts, warm up, charge devices, use the bathroom, get coffee. I made sandwiches. It was the right thing to do. Brenda showed up with the police. Officer Martinez looked confused as he stood on my porch. Sir, we received a report of illegal commercial activity. I am letting my neighbors warm up during an ice storm. No money is changing hands. Everyone here will confirm that. Frank, who was inside with his family, came to the door. Officer, this man is a saint. Our house is 40 degrees inside. He is letting us warm up and charge our phones. There is nothing commercial about it." Officer Martinez looked at Brenda. "Madam, this does not appear to be a police matter. This is a civil HOA issue at most." "He is operating a business," Brenda insisted. "Is anyone paying you?" the officer asked me. "Not a cent." "Then there is no issue here. Madam, please do not call the police for civil HOA matters. We have actual emergencies to deal with during this storm." He tipped his hat to me and left. Brenda was shaking with rage. "This is not over." "I think it is," I said, and closed the door. That night the power came back on for most of the neighborhood. The ice was starting to melt. The crisis was passing. I shut down my generator, grateful it had performed flawlessly. 2 days later, I received a bill in the mail from the HOA. $2,500 in fines. 5 days at $500 per day for the generator. I forwarded it to David. "Do not pay this," he said. "I am going to file a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment and attempting to enforce illegal covenants. This is going to get interesting." A week passed. Life returned to normal. My catering business was fine, not a single piece of inventory lost. I had made money from the events I had been able to fulfill. Everything was good. Then I got the notice that the HOA was placing a lien on my property for unpaid fines, now totaling $4,500 with late fees and interest. "They cannot do this," I told David. "They technically can file the lien, but it is not valid because the underlying fines are not legal. But we need to fight it, which means court. Are you prepared for that?" "Absolutely." We filed our lawsuit. The HOA countersued for the fines plus legal fees. It was going to be a mess. While I was buried in legal paperwork, I decided to do some research on my property. I pulled the original survey, the title history, everything I had from when I purchased the house. I wanted to make sure my property lines were clear and that I had documentation of everything. That is when I found something interesting. There was a utility easement on the property. Not unusual. Most properties have them for power lines, water, sewer. But this easement was specifically for an electrical pole at the back corner of my lot. And according to the survey notes, it was a privately owned pole, not one owned by the electric company. I looked out my back window. Sure enough, there was a power pole at the back corner of my property. I had never paid much attention to it. I assumed it was part of the electrical grid. I called the power company. "I am trying to verify the ownership of a utility pole on my property," I told the representative. She took down the location and looked it up. "That pole is not in our system as utility company property. It is registered as a private pole." "What does that mean?" "It means someone privately owns it. We have an easement to use it, but we do not own it." "Who owns it?" "Let me check the records. One moment." There was a long pause. "According to our records, that pole is owned by the property owner at your address. You would have inherited it when you bought the property." My mind started racing. "And other properties use that pole for power." Let me check the electrical maps. Yes, it looks like that pole services several properties on Meadowbrook Lane. Meadowbrook Lane was the street behind mine. 5 houses backed up to my property line. So I own a pole that provides electricity to 5 other houses. That appears to be correct. It is not common, but it happens in older subdivisions where development happened in phases. Sometimes, private poles were installed to bridge sections before the utility company extended their lines. And I can charge rent for that. There was a pause. That would be between you and the property owners who benefit from it. We just maintain the lines and equipment. The pole itself is yours. I thanked her and hung up. Then I pulled up the property records for the 5 houses on Meadowbrook Lane. Every single one was owned by members of the HOA board, including Brenda Patterson. I started laughing. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. The universe had just handed me the most poetic justice imaginable. I called David. David, I own the utility pole that provides power to the HOA board members' houses. You what? I explained what I had found. He was silent for a long moment. Vincent, this is incredible. Do you know what this means? Tell me. You can absolutely charge them rent for use of your pole. It is your private property. You can also, within legal limits, restrict access or require them to sign agreements. Can I cut their power? Not directly. The power company would not allow that. But you could require the removal of equipment from your pole, which would effectively cut their power until they made other arrangements. That would be expensive for them. Very expensive. Running new lines would cost tens of thousands per property. How much can I charge for rent? Fair market value. For a utility pole easement, you could probably justify anywhere from $100 to several $100s per month per property. These things are usually negotiated with the utility companies for minimal amounts, but for private arrangements, you can set your own rates within reason. What is within reason? A judge would have to agree it is not punitive. But something like $200 per month per property would probably be defensible. That is within the range of what commercial easements go for. I did the math. 5 properties at $200 per month was $1,000 monthly, $12,000 per year. Just for them using my pole that I had not even known I owned. Draft me an agreement, I said. I want to charge them rent retroactive to when I bought the property 5 years ago. That is aggressive. I like it. 2 weeks later, registered letters went out to all 5 properties on Meadowbrook Lane. Each letter informed the property owner that they were using a privately owned utility pole located on my property, and that going forward, they would need to sign an easement agreement and pay rent of $200 per month. Additionally, the letter stated that back rent was owed for the period of my ownership, minus the 3 years that the statute of limitations would prevent me from collecting. The total back rent per property was $4,800. The letter gave them 30 days to respond. I also sent a courtesy copy to the power company, informing them of the ownership situation and the new easement terms. 3 days later, my phone exploded with angry calls. I let them all go to voicemail. Each message was more furious than the last. Brenda left 4 messages, each escalating in volume and threats. You cannot do this. This is extortion. The HOA will sue you into oblivion. You will never get away with this. I saved every voicemail. On day 5, the HOA sent me a letter threatening legal action. I sent a letter back through David, pointing out that they were in violation of property law by using my private property without permission or compensation, and that if they did not sign the easement agreements, I would be forced to require the removal of all equipment from my pole within 60 days per Tennessee property law. That got their attention. Brenda showed up at my door with 2 other board members, Harold and Susan. "We need to talk," Brenda said. She looked like she had not slept in days. "You want to drop the illegal fines and the lien on my property?" I asked. "That is a separate matter." "No, it is not. You started this war, Brenda. You came after me with illegal fines for a legally operated generator during an ice storm. You filed false complaints with the county. You called the police on me for helping my neighbors. You put a lien on my property. And now you are upset that I am enforcing my property rights. $200 a month is outrageous," Harold said. He was a thick man in his 60s who always looked like he was about to have a heart attack. "It is within market rates for utility easements. I had it appraised. In fact, my appraiser said I could justify $300 per month given the location, and the fact that running new lines would cost you each about $40,000. Susan, a thin woman with gray hair and nervous energy, spoke up. "We cannot afford this. We are on fixed incomes." "Then you should have thought about that before trying to fine me $1,500 per day for legally protecting my business." "We can negotiate," Brenda said, her voice strained. "Here is my negotiation. You drop all fines. You remove the lien from my property. You pay my legal fees. You issue a written apology. And you sign a binding agreement that the HOA will never again attempt to restrict legally permitted generators in this subdivision. Do that, and I will reduce the monthly rent to $100 per property and waive the back rent." "That is too much," Brenda said. "Then do not sign. You have 60 days to remove your equipment from my pole. After that, I will have the power company disconnect you for trespassing on private property. Good luck running new lines before summer. I heard the power company is backed up 6 months on new installations." They left without agreeing to anything. A week later, David got a call from the HOA's lawyer. They wanted to settle. The settlement took 2 weeks to negotiate. In the end, they agreed to drop all fines, remove the lien, pay my legal fees of $8,000, and issue a written apology to be posted in the neighborhood newsletter. They also agreed to update the HOA covenants to specifically allow backup generators in compliance with state law. In exchange, I agreed to charge only $50 per month per property for the pole easement, with no back rent. It was not what I had wanted, but $50 per month for doing nothing was still good money, and more importantly, I had won. The checks started arriving the next month. 5 checks, $50 each, with memo lines that said things like pole rental and one from Brenda that just said easement in angry handwriting. But I was not done. During the legal discovery process, something else had come to light. The HOA finances were a mess. Brenda had been president for 2 years, and during that time, the HOA accounts had been depleted from a healthy $40,000 reserve to just under $3,000. Several homeowners, myself included, started asking questions. Where had the money gone? The HOA was required to provide financial statements. When they finally did, after much stalling, the statements showed massive payments to something called Patterson Property Services for neighborhood management and consulting. Patterson was Brenda's married name. Brenda had been paying herself nearly $2,000 per month from HOA funds for services that were supposed to be volunteer board duties. I was not the only one who noticed. Frank, my neighbor, was an accountant. He took one look at the statements and his eyes went wide. "This is embezzlement," he said. "We were sitting in my kitchen, going through printed copies of the financial records. She has been funneling HOA money to herself. Can we prove it?" "These statements prove it. Look, here is a payment for $1,500 for snow removal consultation. We live in Tennessee. We get ice storms, not snow, and when we do, the county handles the roads. What did she consult on?" And here, I pointed to another line item. $3,000 for landscape design review. Our landscaping is handled by a contracted company. What did she review? Frank added up the payments. Over 2 years, she has paid herself or her fake company almost $45,000. "That is felony embezzlement," I said. "We called an emergency HOA meeting. Tennessee law allows homeowners to call special meetings with sufficient petition signatures. We got them easily. Everyone was angry about the depleted reserves and rising HOA fees. The meeting was held at the community clubhouse on a Tuesday evening. 70% of the neighborhood showed up, which was unheard of. Brenda tried to run the meeting, but Frank stood up with the financial statements. "I am making a motion to remove Brenda Patterson as HOA president for cause. specifically financial mismanagement and potential embezzlement. The room erupted. Brenda went pale. "This is out of order." "You cannot just—" "I can, actually," Frank said. "Tennessee HOA law allows for removal of board members with a 2/3 vote of present homeowners for cause. I have cause. You have paid yourself $45,000 from HOA funds over 2 years for services that were never approved by the board and appear to be fabricated. Those were legitimate consulting fees. For what? Show us the work product. Show us the contracts. Show us the board approvals." Brenda could not produce any of it. The vote was not even close. She was removed as president by a vote of 71-3. The 3 were the other board members who had been complicit. We immediately filed a police report for embezzlement. Detective Sarah Williams from the Financial Crimes Unit took our statement and the financial records. "This looks pretty clear-cut," she said. "I will need to subpoena the bank records and interview Mrs. Patterson, but if what you are showing me is accurate, this is definitely criminal." 2 weeks later, Brenda was arrested and charged with felony embezzlement. The amount she had stolen qualified as a Class C felony in Tennessee, carrying a potential sentence of 3 to 15 years. She tried to blame it on accounting errors. Then on her husband, claiming he had set up the company and she did not know what was happening. Then on the previous board for approving payments she could not prove were ever approved. Nothing stuck. The evidence was overwhelming. 4 months later, she took a plea deal. 3 years in prison, 5 years probation, and full restitution of $45,000 plus legal fees and interest. Her house on Meadowbrook Lane, the one that backed up to my property and used my pole for power, went up for sale to help pay the restitution. I considered buying it just for the irony, but decided against it. The new HOA board, which I declined to join despite being asked several times, was competent and reasonable. They focused on actual neighborhood needs like road maintenance and common area upkeep. They left homeowners alone about things like generators and yard decorations, as long as everything was legal and maintained. My catering business continued to thrive. I kept the generator maintained and ready. We had another ice storm the following winter, and when the power went out again, I was ready. This time, nobody complained. In fact, several neighbors asked me where I had purchased my generator because they wanted their own. I still collect $50 per month from the 5 properties on Meadowbrook Lane. It is barely noticeable money at this point, but every time those checks arrive, I smile. It is not about the money. It is about the principle. The checks remind me that sometimes, when someone tries to abuse their power, the universe has a way of evening the score. You just have to be patient and know your rights. Frank and I became good friends through the whole ordeal. We get together once a month for dinner, and he still laughs about the pole rental situation. The look on Brenda's face when she realized you owned the pole that powered her house, he said over beers one evening. I wish I had taken a picture. The best part was how it all came together, I said. If she had just left me alone about the generator, none of this would have happened. I never would have dug into my property records. I never would have found the pole ownership. The HOA finances never would have been scrutinized. She would still be embezzling and nobody would know. Pride comes before the fall, Frank said. In her case, pride came before the arrest. We clinked glasses to that. A year after everything settled, I was featured in a local business magazine about running a successful home-based catering company. They asked about challenges I had faced. I told them about the ice storm, the generator, and the HOA battle, though I left out the embezzlement part. That was public record, but it felt like piling on. The article got picked up by a few HOA reform blogs and websites. I started getting emails from people around the country dealing with similar situations. Overreaching HOA boards, illegal fines, harassment for things that were legally protected. I answered what I could and referred them to resources about HOA law in their states. David actually started getting clients from my responses, homeowners who needed legal help fighting their HOAs. One woman from Colorado emailed me to say my story had inspired her to fight back against her HOA that was trying to fine her for solar panels that were protected under state law. She won her case, and the HOA had to reimburse her legal fees. Another man from Florida was dealing with an HOA that was trying to ban American flags, which is federally protected. He cited my case in his legal response, and the HOA immediately backed down. It felt good knowing that standing up for myself had helped other people find the courage to stand up for themselves. The property that had been Brenda's house sold to a nice couple from Kentucky, Mark and Jennifer. They were in their 30s with 2 small kids. Mark was a software engineer working remotely, and Jennifer was a teacher. I introduced myself when they moved in and mentioned the pole situation. "Oh, we knew about that," Mark said. "It was in the disclosure documents. $50 a month for electricity is fine. We pay way more than that to the power company anyway. Just wanted to make sure there were no surprises." No surprises. Actually, we heard about what happened with the previous owner, the embezzlement thing. That was wild. It was a strange couple of years. "Well, if you ever need anything, let us know. And hey, if the power goes out, can we use your warming station?" He grinned. "Absolutely." They turned out to be great neighbors. 2 years after the ice storm, I was doing better than ever. My catering business had expanded to the point where I was considering opening an actual restaurant location. The home kitchen was getting cramped with the volume of orders. I had also started teaching cooking classes on weekends, which had become surprisingly popular. People loved learning to make restaurant-quality food at home. Life was good. The HOA left me alone. My neighbors were friendly. My generator sat ready in case of emergency, but I had not needed it except for one brief outage during a summer storm. Then one evening, I got a knock on my door. It was Detective Williams. "Mr. Dalton, I wanted to give you an update. Brenda Patterson was released on parole last week." My stomach dropped. "Already? I thought she had 3 years. She served 18 months with good behavior and overcrowding credits. She is on parole for the remainder." "Is she coming back here?" "Her parole restrictions prohibit her from living in this county due to the nature of the crime. She cannot be near the HOA she defrauded, but I wanted you to know she is out, just in case." "In case what?" "In case she tries to contact you or cause problems." "She blamed you pretty heavily during her time in prison, according to the reports. Said you ruined her life." "She ruined her own life by stealing $45,000. "I agree. Just stay alert. If she contacts you, violates the restraining order, or shows up here, call me immediately." She handed me her card. I thanked her and closed the door, feeling uneasy. A week passed without incident. Then 2 weeks. I started to relax. Then I came home from a catering event to find my mailbox had been smashed with a bat. The post was bent, the box dented and hanging open. Mail was scattered across the lawn. I called the police and filed a report. They dusted for prints but found nothing useful. 3 days later, someone slashed 2 of my tires overnight. The security camera I had installed after the mailbox incident caught a figure in dark clothes and a hood, but the face was not visible. I called Detective Williams. "I cannot prove it is her," she said after reviewing the footage, "but I will talk to her parole officer. If she is violating parole, that is an immediate problem for her." 2 days later, my generator was vandalized. Someone had poured sand into the gas line connection and damaged the control panel. That was $1,500 in repairs. Now I was angry. I upgraded my security system to include multiple cameras with night vision and motion sensors. I also parked my catering van in the garage instead of the driveway. The vandalism stopped after that, but I could not shake the feeling of being watched. Then Mark from next door called me. "Vincent, there was a woman hanging around your property today while you were gone. She was walking around back by the utility pole. I thought it was weird, so I watched from my window. She was taking pictures." "What did she look like?" "50s, brown hair, kind of angry looking. Brenda." I called Detective Williams again. "That is a parole violation," she said. "She is not supposed to be in this county at all. I am contacting her parole officer right now." Brenda was arrested that evening for violating parole. Because it was her first violation and she claimed she was just visiting a friend in the area, she only got a warning and additional restrictions. But the harassment stopped. 6 months later, I sold my house. Not because of Brenda and not because of bad memories. I sold it because I bought the restaurant location I had been eyeing, and it made sense to move closer to downtown Nashville where the business was. The house sold quickly, and for a good price. The new owners were a family from Atlanta, and I made sure they understood about the utility pole and the easement agreements. "So we will get $50 a month from 5 different houses?" the husband asked. "Every month. It is in the sale documents. The easement agreements transfer with the property." "That is wild. Free money." "It is not much, but it adds up. Before I closed on the sale, I made sure to stop by Frank's house to say goodbye properly." "You are really leaving?" he asked. "Time to move on. The business has outgrown the home kitchen anyway. We will miss you. You know you are a legend in this neighborhood now, right? The guy who fought the HOA and won." I just stood up for myself. Most people do not. That is why it matters. We shook hands, and I promised to save him a table at the new restaurant. My new restaurant, called Dalton's, opened 3 months later in the Germantown neighborhood of Nashville. It was everything I had dreamed of. A full commercial kitchen, a dining room that sat 50, and a private event space for catering. The opening was packed with friends, former neighbors, and people who had heard my story. Even David showed up with his wife. "To new beginnings," he toasted, "and to knowing your property rights." Everyone laughed. Frank was there with his wife Sarah and their kids. "You did it, Vincent. This place is incredible. Could not have done it without you helping expose Brenda's embezzlement. That was all her. We just shined a light on it. The restaurant succeeded beyond my expectations. The food was great, the service was excellent, and the story behind how I got there became part of the restaurant's charm. People loved hearing about the HOA battle, the generator, the utility pole. It became a cautionary tale about abuse of power and a feel-good story about justice. A local news station did a feature on the restaurant and interviewed me about the whole saga. The segment went viral locally, and I ended up getting calls from people in other states asking for advice on fighting their HOAs. I always told them the same thing. Document everything, know your rights, get a good lawyer, and do not be afraid to stand up for yourself. 3 years after opening Dalton's, I was doing well enough to open a second location in Franklin, just south of Nashville. Business was booming. I had a great team. Life was exactly where I wanted it to be. One afternoon, I was at the original Germantown location going over supply orders when the hostess came back to find me. "Vincent, there is someone here to see you. She says it is important." I walked out to the front and stopped short. Brenda Patterson was standing in my restaurant. She looked older, thinner, worn down by prison and life. Her hair was grayer. She was not wearing the expensive clothes I remembered, just jeans and a plain jacket. "Mr. Dalton," she said, "can we talk?" Every instinct told me to throw her out, to tell her to leave and never come back, but something in her face made me pause. "You have 5 minutes." We sat at a corner table. She did not order anything. "I came to apologize," she said, "for everything. The fines, the harassment, the vandalism, all of it." I waited. "I was wrong." "About all of it. You were just trying to protect your business, and I turned it into this power trip because I was angry that someone was not following what I said. And then, when you found the pole thing, I just lost it. I could not handle being beaten." "You did not just beat yourself, Brenda. You committed multiple crimes." "I know. I went to prison for 18 months. I lost my house, my marriage, my reputation. I deserved all of it. What do you want from me?" "Nothing. Just to say I am sorry. I have been doing therapy and working on myself. Part of that is making amends to people I hurt. You were at the top of that list." I studied her face. She looked sincere, broken but sincere. "I accept your apology," I said finally, "but I do not forgive the actions. What you did was not just wrong to me. You stole from an entire neighborhood. You abused your authority. You tried to destroy my livelihood out of spite." "I know. I am not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging what I did and that I am sorry." She stood up to leave. "Brenda," I said. She turned. "Get help, real help. Do not just apologize to people and then go back to the same patterns. Actually change." "I am trying," she said quietly. Then she left. I never saw her again. 5 years after the ice storm that started everything, Dalton's was a Nashville institution. 2 locations, a thriving catering business, and a reputation for excellent food and service. I had achieved everything I set out to do when I started cooking professionally. More importantly, I had learned that standing up for yourself matters, that knowing your rights matters, that not backing down in the face of bullying and abuse of power matters. The $50 check still came every month, forwarded from the new owners of my old house per our agreement. I donated them to a legal aid fund that helped homeowners fight predatory HOAs. It seemed appropriate. Frank and I still had dinner once a month. His kids were getting big. Sarah had been promoted at work. Life went on. One evening over steaks at the restaurant, Frank raised his glass to the most ridiculous property dispute in Tennessee history. "To knowing that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor," I countered. "To generators. To utility poles." We laughed and drank and told the story again, because it never got old. The story of how an HOA president tried to fine me for using a generator during an ice storm, and ended up in prison while I ended up charging her rent for the privilege of using my utility pole to power her house. Sometimes justice is not just served. Sometimes it is served with a side of irony and a bill for services rendered. And sometimes, when you stand up for yourself, you do not just win your own fight. You inspire others to fight theirs. That is the real victory. Not the money, not the revenge, not even the successful business that came from it all. The real victory is knowing that somewhere out there, someone else read my story or heard about what happened, and found the courage to tell their own petty tyrant that enough is enough. That is worth more than any amount of pole rental fees. Though I will admit, the pole rental fees do not hurt either.